There has been a lot of debate lately whether the Bitcoin bull market is actually over or not. Some people believe the cycle is just taking a pause, while some believe that the bear market is already here. In this video, I want to zoom out and look at Bitcoin from a structural, historical and macro perspective and explain why, in my opinion, we are already in a bear market. I'll go over what I'm watching when it comes to finding a potential bottom and how I'm personally approaching this bear market. First, let's zoom out on Bitcoin's weekly time frame and look at it through the 4-year cycle. Some very clear patterns start to appear. Historically, major cycle tops formed in 2013, 2017, and again in 2021. After each of those tops, Bitcoin entered a bear market that lasted a little over a year. In this cycle, Bitcoin peaked in 2025 at around $126,000. Since then, prices dropped more than 30% and Bitcoin has already been trending down for about 4 months now. That alone doesn't confirm a bear market, but it does fit the early stages that we have seen in previous cycles. One argument I hear a lot is that we didn't see true euphoria in 2025, and I actually agree with that, but instead of topping on euphoria, I think we topped on apathy this cycle. People slowly lost interest instead of piling in at the top. If we use this logic that we topped on apathy, it is also worth looking at 2019. Bitcoin also topped during a period of apathy back then, and after that top, we still went into a bear market. Another important thing here is the timing. Historically, Bitcoin cycles tops in Q4 of the post-halving year. Some people will say that this top in 2025 came in early Q4, but when you look at number of days between cycle tops, it actually lines up really well with previous cycles looking at the length. Bear markets have also historically played out in midterm years, which would make 2026 the likely bear market year this time around. So when you combine the timing, the historical cycle structure, and the fact that we have already been trending down for months now, the idea that the bull market is over at this point makes a lot of sense. It's not just timing that matters, structure is just as important. And structurally, Bitcoin has clearly started to break down. One of the key indicators I watch is the 50-day moving average on the weekly time frame. This level has historically been super important both for bull and bear markets. During bull markets, Bitcoin tends to hold this level as support and bounce off it repeatedly. In this cycle, Bitcoin held the 50-week moving average for over 2.5 years during the bull market. Every time price touched it, it bounced. That level acted as a backbone for the bullish structure. However, shortly after this cycle top, Bitcoin broke below the 50-day moving average. If we look at previous cycles, once Bitcoin loses this level, the bull market is usually over. That moving average flips from support to resistance. So far we haven't retested this level from below, and if we do, history suggests that we should see a rejection from this level instead of a continuation higher. Another important signal is the bearish divergence we saw form over time. We saw something very similar in 2021 before entering the last bear market. That divergence acted as a warning signal for months, and now it has started to play out just like it did last cycle. Macro conditions are another key reason why this cycle felt different compared to previous cycles. If we start looking at the labor market, jobless claims are still relatively stable and nowhere near levels that have historically signaled recessions. That's a good thing overall, but it also means that there is no strong reason for the Fed to cut rates aggressively right now. Looking at liquidity, QE technically restarted after QT ended in December 2025. However, so far the effects have been limited. We are nowhere near the liquidity environment we saw in 2020 and 2021, which is the last time crypto experienced a true mania phase. This lack of liquidity also explains why the retail interest was so low this cycle. Without strong liquidity conditions, it's very hard for prices to sustain explosive upside moves. Inflation also plays a role here. PCE inflation is currently at 2.8%. The Fed's target is roughly 2%. And historically, once inflation approaches 3%, that's when the Fed starts paying closer attention. With inflation at 2.8% and the labor market holding up, there is no clear reason to expect a large amount of rate cuts in 2026. Market expectations reflect that as well. Right now, expectations are leaning toward only a few rate cuts, especially after the most recent FOMC meeting where rates were left unchanged. That said, a few rate cuts could still be a positive development. It helps set the stage for better conditions once we enter the next bull market, especially compared to what we had in 2025. So when can we expect a bottom? Now, first off, finding the exact bottom is impossible, but there is indicators that can help us give an idea of when we might be getting close. One of the simplest indicators to understand is the RSI on the weekly time frame. It's very rare for Bitcoin's weekly RSI to enter the oversold zone below 30, but when it does, it has historically lined up fairly closely with cycle bottoms. It's not a perfect indicator and price can still go lower, but even buying near those levels has historically been really good long-term interest. Right now, the weekly RSI is sitting at around 36 at the time of recording this video. That's not oversold yet, but close enough to be something I'm watching closely. It could reset a bit before moving lower, or it could just move straight down to the oversold zone. Either way, I think it's an important area to watch. Another way to look for bottoms is with price levels and long-term moving averages. I have talked about this in previous videos, so I won't be going too much into detail with it. But when Bitcoin enters cheap or the very cheap zone, I become more aggressive with my accumulation. This very cheap level is based on the 200-week moving average. Historically, this level marked the bottom in 2014 and 2018. In 2022, price briefly went below it before eventually bottoming. If we move into these areas again, I'm not trying to time the bottom exactly, I'm buying. As for how long this bear market can last, it's hard to say exactly how long it's gonna be, but we can look at historical averages. Traditionally, Bitcoin bear markets last a little over a year. If we go by this model and assume Bitcoin topped in October 2025, a bottom sometime in late 2026 wouldn't be unreasonable. But again, this cycle didn't have that true euphoria phase. So that raises the question if we are going to see a brutal bear market like we have seen previous times. So since we topped on apathy in 2025, let's try to compare it to 2019, where we also topped on apathy. Back then, Bitcoin bottomed roughly 259 days later. If we apply the same timeline to this cycle, we could start seeing signs of a bottom around mid to late June. That doesn't mean price can't go lower, but it suggests that the bear market could be shorter and more compressed this time. So I'm personally gonna start to look for signs of a bottom around June this year, and if the market starts to go lower, I will start to look for signs of a bottom around October if we compare it to previous cycles. So just to be clear, I'm not trading this, I'm not shorting Bitcoin, I'm simply shifting from expecting upside to now expecting opportunities. For me, that means accumulations, more patience, and thinking in years instead of months. So I'm not bearish long term and I'm not panicking right now. It just means that I'm adjusting my expectations going forward. Calling the exact bottom is more luck than skill, but one thing I know for sure is that I'm going to be buying before the bottom and even more aggressively if we move lower. If you still believe that the bull market isn't over, that's totally fine. The goal here isn't to convince anyone, but to look at data from different angles and be objective. So if you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe, comment down below what I should do next and what I can do better. I love to hear from you guys. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.